All right, let's get into our last story. Weird one, awkward one to talk about. And the reason it's weird and awkward to talk about is because nobody knows how to talk about this subject. It's one that unfortunately hits close to home for me, and that is Cleveland Browns quarterback Deshaun Watson. We could have done like this topic earlier in the NFL season because this like thought I've had percolating in my head ever since Deshaun Watson got to the Browns in 2022 is just nobody knows how to talk about this guy. He's been accused credibly of more than 24 accusations of sexual misconduct, including one lawsuit that was filed and then settled in the last couple of months where he was accused of sexual assault. He's settled more than 20 lawsuits regarding these allegations, and yet he's remained a quarterback in the NFL for the team that I follow in the city that I live in, the Cleveland Browns. And it seemingly all came to a head on Sunday. I was at the game, a really bizarre experience because on the one hand, you had Nick Chubb's return after a horrific knee injury a year ago. So for as bad as the Brown season has been, like you did have this uniting force among the fan base, like, hey, we get to see Nick Chubb play football game again. On the other hand, this was the Browns' first home game in a month, which meant it was Deshaun Watson's first home game in a month, which meant it was the first opportunity Browns fans had to boo him, which they did mightily as he came out of the tunnel for player intros, which was, borderline uncomfortable. And then Deshaun goes out and in the second of the quarter of the game, very obviously tears his Achilles, season-ending injury. Cart comes out. There's a smattering of cheers across the crowd. I don't know if it picked up on TV because I know I was going back and forth with our guys on Slack, and they said they couldn't pick it up on TV, but it was enough.
Clips where people were posting saying, listen to the cheers. I still couldn't make it out. So you being there, I feel like is about as authoritative as we're going to get.
Yeah, and it was, I would say it was a smattering of cheers. In the part where I really noticed it was a bunch of players on the Browns sideline turned around and were like jawing with fans. And so it was like while the cart's coming out in the field, it was an ugly scene. But so the fallout from this is you had players like Myles Garrett and Jameis Winston go into post game and admonish Browns fans for cheering an injury. And then the fallout from that is you have members of the media and, people in the talk sports space admonishing those Browns players for painting Deshaun Watson as a sympathetic figure. So it's such a messy situation. I can just tell you from interacting with Browns fans every day, Browns fans in general, it's been a divisive topic since they acquired him in 2022 with those allegations. I don't think you can paint all Browns fans under one brush with any of this, but man, just a totally bizarre experience. And then it bled into the sports media world. How did you process any of this?
I processed it as a continuation of the whole experience. I think sounds like you did as well. My question is actually along the lines of what you were just saying. And of course, you can't overgeneralize here, but if you just kind of combine together the media reaction locally and the general fan buzz, what was the response when they got him? Like, in hindsight, how would you kind of summarize how people were feeling when they trade for him, give him the huge guaranteed contract amid not only these allegations, but an active suspension?
It was very polarizing. One, I'd say mainly, and this speaks to football fans in America, mainly because moving on from Baker Mayfield was such a polarizing decision. Mm-hmm. And so you had fans who were upset they were moving on from Baker. You had fans who were upset because of the allegations against Deshaun. I think you had a large portion of fans stuck somewhere in between where, like, hey, they didn't feel great about this from an off the field perspective, but they thought they knew that it was going to at least be an upgrade on the football field. You had some I mean, that's the thing is I think there are fans who left. Like I know multiple fans who just flat out left the fan base. You have fans who then defiantly supported Deshaun. and I mean, basically went conspiracy theorist about the allegations against him. And then I think you had a lot of fans, and I would probably say myself included, who you don't feel great about it. Like for me, like I just couldn't root for him. Like I would watch them and try to separate the off the field stuff from the football. And I'm not saying like this is easy for me to say in hindsight, especially with how poorly he played, but like he just was not an easy guy to root for, regardless of how he performed. But he also did us a lot of favors by performing so poorly that he was easy to root against. So I think that's, you had the most of the fan base was somewhere stuck in between where they didn't want to stop rooting for the football team because this is like what Cleveland does, but they also never really felt great about this guy being the quarterback. I think the interesting part, and we'll never find out, is what would have happened if he played well. That's where it would have.
That was going to be my next question, because Mina Kimes had a monologue last season when he finally kind of got fully back, so to speak, and she said like Deshaun playing poorly is saving us from a lot of uncomfortable conversations. I don't know how big of a difference that would really make. I mean, I guess him being good would have, she's right that it would have forced a decision on the part of the media more, because now you can sort of get away with just ignoring him. He's not that relevant in the national conversation about the NFL, and neither have the Browns been, because he's played so poorly. But And then I guess the flip side of that is that because he has played so bad, that did for sure contribute to what we saw crop up this weekend on the side of the players and certain members of the media who have now been able to kind of, and combined, we should also say, with injuries that ended his season last year and now are doing the same thing again, this sort of victim mentality develops because it can be kind of sequestered into the same camp as somebody who just had a bad year.
Yeah.
You know, and so I guess the quality of his play matters in how the conversation has played out, but I don't know how different it ultimately would have been. And I guess I kind of come down on the fact that the reality behind all of this that I feel, Ben, and you might feel differently, I just don't think anybody wants to talk about the other stuff. I watch so much of this content. I don't think anybody wants to talk about it. I don't think it would have mattered if he was great, awful, got hurt immediately, whatever. I don't think anyone has any interest in delving into the allegations now that he's back playing football, and that story can be treated as the past. Despite what you just said, which is that another one of these things came out freaking 2 months ago, and no one cares. I just don't think the biggest voices covering sports want to have that conversation. It doesn't matter who it is or how good they are.
I mean, think about that there was a starting quarterback, relatively high profile starting quarterback facing a lawsuit for sexual assault this season. And I don't know if it ever got covered on ESPN's morning shows. It might have the day after. This is something that, at least in my experience growing up watching sports and covering it, would have been like a lead story on SportsCenter every day, the latest. And I don't know if it's because there were so many allegations that we just became numb to it, or because we were in the midst of football season, and so it was easy to just kind of, talk about the Cowboys and the Jets every week. But you did see, I will say, you said, I think you're right. We didn't want to talk about it because there were glimpses where he played well. Like they lost to the Raiders a month ago, and he played what might have been, statistically his best game for the Browns. And you saw a lot of analysts, tweeting out just about his PFF grades or tweeting out that he played well. And it's just, that's what's made it such a bizarre experience, is even here in Cleveland, like listening to the radio and listening to games on the radio and hearing the radio broadcast get excited went on the rare occasion that he did make a play, it did not match what I was feeling inside about Deshaun Watson playing well. And so it just makes for this totally, as a fan, at least, disjointed experience. But I think you're right. I don't think we wanted to talk about it. And I don't know if we know how to talk about it, because there is nuance in, allegations that come in the form of lawsuits as opposed to criminal complaints and all of that. And that's not to justify any of it or to vindicate Deshaun, because look, I mean, you got to have upwards of 30 allegations. I think we can all kind of do the math there, but it's just such a messy topic for average sports fans, myself included, to have to try to talk about. And so it's just easier to focus on what's on the field.
Yeah, but you know who it's not messy for is people who are paid to talk about it, right? So it's like I think that the problem to me is like I'm a big you should have to say the full extent of what you mean. And I won't I don't want to say specific names. There are hosts who have done a better job, I think, than others. I get the idea of not wanting to accuse him of things that because they're settlements, there's a natural grayness, right? Like there is
Right.
an uncertainty around what you can say is true and not true about the exact specifics. But my thing is like people who I think that this booing thing was a perfect example where there was this kind of like the general refrain that I heard was like, you can be mad at him for all the things he's done, but but my thing about how you shouldn't boo him. And it's like, you should have to, if you're in the media, confront those people's perspectives. You should have at least some opinion about whether you agree with fans who feel disgusted by him and would go to the lengths of cheering the injury. I keep saying booing. He was cheering during the injury. You should at least have something to say because it happened. You know what I mean? It's almost like just living in willful ignorance to say, you can feel that way, but I don't. Okay, that's not even an opinion. It's just basically saying, I don't want to have this conversation, but it's a big story, so therefore I have to say anything. And I'm not going to lie, I think that more athletes participating in these conversations has made that worse. I think that athletes are so extreme in wanting to just kind of side with the athlete in these types of situations that we've gone too far in the other direction. And there's an ability to just kind of play it off that I don't think it does anybody any favors. It's opting out of something that it, like you're saying, you live there. How big this has been for 4 years and you don't hear anything about it. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's definitely, kind of yada yaing the the elephant in the room, the reason why this is a big story. And yeah, I thought the reaction from the players. Look, I get it. I get that they all see themselves as Deshaun Watson, right? They're afraid, hey, if I go down with an injury and you're not happy with the way I'm playing, are you going to boo me? But I think that ignores the largest context.
Well, the answer
to
for
this
Myles
story.
Garrett is no.
Right.
We
Exactly.
know that. It's not. They're not going to. Jameis, probably not the best messenger for that particular topic.
That was
right?
rich. That was very rich. Jameis Winston can spare me the moral lectures on how he was raised and in all of that, because Jameis, do some digging there on Wikipedia, and it's pretty easy to find. So maybe I just did what
need multiple searches for Jameis on that one.
Yeah.